Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. You're in different time zones. So I'm going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but I'm not saying good night. Hopefully you will be staying with us while we go through this. As Nicola said, my name is Pheona Croom Johnson. I'm the academic director and co-founder of Sandown Business School. We're triple accredited as a school, so we work with ICF, EMCC, and AC. And I am a treble accredited coach and also ESIA supervisor. I'll show you a little bit about me in a moment. But what would be great is to hear, how are you arriving? So I am going to get you being interactive. So if you've come for time where you can just chill out and chomp on a sandwich or something, you might want to turn your camera off. But otherwise, please do engage because I'd love to hear from you. But in the chat, what's one word that describes your energy right now? How would you describe that? And where you're from, Tim, you beat me to it. Please put in. Where are you calling in from as well? Lovely, thank you. So that we get a real sense of our geography and location. There's also that impacts our energy as well, doesn't it? And again, keep it going with that somatic feeling. You know, how are you arriving into this session? Do that body check. And for yourself, what I'd encourage you to do is just notice the differences of energy in the room. From tired to excited, from curious to be happy, to be interested, to be challenged. Can you see the variations? Now, this energy is all in one place right now. So whenever we're doing this kind of dialogue, it's recognizing there are so many different biological markers that are happening with us as we come together as a group. What does this have to do with staying one step ahead? All will be revealed. So there's me looking great on a good day. I always say that with our photos, looking all shiny. I do loads of different work, but what I really enjoy is working with our students and getting that standard for coaching is really important for me. Again, we come across a lot of coaches that have been coaching for a long time and sometimes, you know, different variations on time, but often they don't feel confident or comfortable coaching. And it's interesting looking at, well, what is your signature fingerprint in coaching? So if we're thinking about we need to be a step ahead, if we don't know what it is we're offering, it's really difficult for us to stay ahead. So that's one of the first steps. What kind of a coach are you? And do you know when you come with your clients what you're bringing? Those of you who like a bit of a map, let me orientate you into today. So we'll do a little bit of group contracting. We've done a bit around arriving into the room, and I will explain about that in a moment. What is one step ahead? And I've got some 5 different ways. There's also an ebook, which is free if you want it. Just reach out and I'll send that to you. And then we'll look at 6 behaviours that create that mindset mastery. Now, we've got an hour and a half. So you can already see we're going to be flying past some of these, but hopefully they'll give you enough of a taster. We want to look at one practice, which is optimism, which is linked to EQI, and then we'll close together. Now, as this is a dialogue, it is not just a presentation. So I will give you things to look at. I will encourage your thinking, but I would ask and invite you to put comments in chat, maybe stop the session, put your hand up because that's how I'll see you, because then you'll come to the front of the queue, and let's have your voice in the room. So please don't see this as I'm just going to speak at you. That isn't my style. I much prefer the discussion, the inquiry, the curiosity, because that's where we can learn together. And I'm hoping that I'm bringing will be a catalyst for that kind of dialogue. So contribution share, give yourself permission, even with a big room, to let your voice be heard if you would like it to be heard. You will need a pen and paper, or if you draw on a computer, that's absolutely fine, that's up to you. But we'll do an exercise towards the end where you'll need some kind of instrument to catch it on. Please, as I say, do put comments and things in the chat box. Although, just to warn you, when I've got my screen sharing, I won't see the chat so easily. So if you're asking a question, it's often when I come off shared that I can see some of the questions. So please don't be concerned if I haven't addressed it. It's just that I haven't seen it yet. Keep an open mind. You know, often we can come to these kind of spaces with not a closed mindset, but we come with ideas or practices that we already have in place. Can I encourage us? Let's learn from one another. You know, what is it that Anna Kane, you're on my screen, what is it Anna does that I can think I can learn of? What is it that Rhoda does? And different people here. You know, how can we really learn to get best practice? Why? Because we're going to be elevating the professionalism of coaching, which is actually a real heartbeat for me. Have some fun with your learning. Give yourself permission about that. And if you're dashing in, catch your breath. Feet on the ground, feel like you're here, and really arrive. That whole presence piece. You know, we can be charging in, can't we? So this is a time just to kind of settle yourself. Okay, let me move us on. So if we're thinking about how we arrive, it's really important to set that intention right at the beginning. And that's why I ask, how are you arriving? It's important to recognize what is the energy that you're bringing into a room. Now, I hope you will do this with your clients regularly anyway, but it's also useful when we do peer-to-peer work, when we do supervision work. What is my energy? Because my energy will impact you, doesn't it? That self-regulation impacts co-regulation. So that internal check, what is my energy that I'm conscious of right now? And if you think about how you did arrive here, what self-regulation did you do before you walked in? Or pressed a button and came in? You know, how do we self-regulate? And even that term, what does it mean to you? And again, when we're thinking about how do we stay ahead, those coaches who get hold of these practices seem to have very different coaching sessions. So how do you self-regulate? Think to yourself as well, what is it you're here for? Why have you come? What are you hoping to walk away with? Set your intention right at the beginning. And lastly, how will you know when you've achieved it? Now, we don't tend to ask that question, do we? We'll often say, what is it I want? You know, what is it that I'm kind of really focused on? But we don't really get into how will I know if I have achieved it? What are some of your thoughts when you hear and have responded to those questions? Any voices want to be brave and speak into this room?
In terms of those questions, I think that they're really valuable questions for us as coaches, especially if you coach a range of different people with a range of different needs, and to take the time to just do the work before the sessions you have with people on yourself so that you're in the right place for the people you coach.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely, Anna. Any other voices?
When you were asking what kind of energy I was bringing into the room, I was thinking how tired I was feeling.
Yep.
But then when you started to speak more about, you know, the kind of energy you bring and how you affect a room, and then I thought how easy it is to change that, you know. So, you know, from being tired to maybe changing your body stance and maybe a bit more upright, and how easy it is to change that, you know. So
yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Really nice, Jennifer. And again, when we're thinking about our coaching, are we going from session to session? In which case, how do we regulate in between those sessions? Now, how many of us have clients that say, I go from session to session? Got any of those kind of clients? I mean, I've been nearly 40 years in this business. I cannot tell you how many clients will come and say, you know, you are one of many. And I'll often say to them, so what's the time that you're taking after our time together? And they'll say, oh, no, I've got to go straight to another meeting. Ah, can we explore that together? You know, there's something about how do we encourage them, our clients, to take a breath. But if we're not doing it, we're not modeling it. We're not practicing it. And therefore, that energy that we bring in is not regulating our clients. So I love that, Jennifer, in terms of how quickly we can move, which actually does just sort us out in terms of our energy. Okay, any other comments before I go back to sharing some slides?
Yeah, what you said there about clients moving on to another meeting very quickly. And so even coming out of the room at the end,
Yeah.
finding myself to have time to reflect on how that session went and take notes to remind myself the next time what have we discussed. I think it's something which is easy to forget about and you just jump onto the next thing. But even if it's a 10-minute reflection.
Yeah, really nice.
Ending, doing it at the start as well.
Yeah, lovely, Nicola. And there is something about, do we always have to have 60-minute sessions? You know, how do we challenge some of the assumptions that we make about our sessions? There are some real strong coaching agencies right now who coach for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. All our students are encouraged to have 30-minute sessions when they're looking at particular agendas. So again, how do we manage our time? Because you're right, Nicola, if I've got hour-long sessions and they are back to back, where do we catch up with ourselves? To give you a little tip, one of the things I often do is in my diary, I use Calendly, and I can put some time either side, which I do 15 minutes before and after, so I don't have to keep being conscious of it. Because when I have to keep being conscious, I've got to remember it consciously, you know, and it kind of can get lost. So that was a really nice little tip that I use that may be useful for yourselves. Diane, I did mention you earlier, but I don't know if you wanted to speak or you were just waving at me, and I'm happy either way.
Oh, thank you. And I just wanted to say about preparation, really. We always talk about preparation is 90% of success. And with our coaching, we don't necessarily need to prepare because we don't know what the client wants, but we need to prepare ourselves. So it was really following on from what everyone was talking about.
Really nice, and a different perspective slightly, Diane. So I'm really glad you added your voice to the room.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is something about that inner preparation that really does set us up. And you're right, we've no idea where our clients are going to go. Otherwise, we're leading and directing. But it is that, how am I right now? And that's why I did that question. What's the energy that you're walking in with or that you're tapping in with? How often do we do a somatic check? How are you working with your somatics? You know, so when your client has got different energy, how do you recognize? So I often talk about calibration. How do I calibrate how my client is arriving so that when something happens, I'm able to see it really easily because I've got that calibration? Yeah. And you'll have different terminologies for doing the same kind of things. So what we're thinking of here is when we're setting our intention, we talk a lot about our whole system. So we come from a neuroscience background. We talk about our head brain, our heart brain, and our gut brain. And that alignment is what really sets us up for success. But it also needs to be clear, what are our energy levels? And if I'm running on low, I'm not going to be as resourceful for my client. I'm not going to be able to be as open to just let come whatever I'm systemically reading from either my client's linguistics or the environment. So that openness comes when I'm much more resourced. So my batteries are full. And again, you know, my tendency can be a bit like a Duracell battery. I can keep going. I have to stop myself and just say, do you know what? Your battery is not on green charge right now. You need to go and do something else to just kind of create that charge inside. And what does that give us? A real kind of healthy whole system approach. So that's why we often talk about setting your intention right at the beginning. And let me move on. So what does it mean to be one step ahead? Now, I love this picture because often when we're thinking about one step ahead, it's almost like we've got to be charging right in front of everyone. But as you see from this picture, it's just like a head. it's one head. So with our clients, it's how can we keep that one step ahead? It's not talking about knowing everything and being right at the fore. It really is one step. And here are 5 ways. And I have, as I've mentioned, this ebook. If you just send me an email or something, I'll send this to you. It's, as I say, it's free, but and it goes into a lot more detail that I'm going to go into right now. But if we're thinking about being one step ahead, there is something about, if I'm looking to stay ahead, I'm not settling. I don't feel like I know and I'm the best I'm able to be. It keeps a humility. It keeps a learning desire to really keep pushing myself forward for excellence and for best practice. And I'm sure in the room, that is something that we're always looking for. How do we ensure that the professionalism of coaching is staying relevant to the clients that we're working with? So how do we do this? And here are 5 ways. So firstly, anticipating client needs. Now that's easier said than done sometimes, isn't it? Especially when we've got a whole range of clients. What is it that they need? It can be anything. So where do we come in? Is how do we globally listen to who they are? And we often talk about global listening. So it's not just listening for language. It's just not listening in terms of isolation. It's that whole global systemic listening. And how do we do that? So it's a biological focus as well as a somatic, as well as a linguistic. And the other thing about anticipating client needs, if a client is coming to you and maybe they want to talk about an area that you know nothing about, and obviously we don't need to know anything about the different areas that our clients are bringing to us. If I'm setting myself up as a leadership coach, but I actually have no understanding of what leadership is, what it means to be in leadership, I've never worked at that level, I've never experienced it, I'm going to find it really difficult to understand their needs. I'm going to find it difficult to appreciate the pressures that they're on. Now, I can still potentially coach, but I'm not going to be asking the questions that will support them to look at their own space. So that might be slightly controversial, and I'm happy to have more of a discussion around that. Current trends mastery. AI is here to stay right now. How have you embraced AI? How are you looking at AI? How are you working with AI? Because your clients is going to be becoming more and more so. And again, I've been looking at different comments about AI. Some people are really scared about it. Some are skeptical, and others are really embracing it. But what's your relationship with current trends around technology? There are wonderful apps that you can support your clients with, which are all about self-awareness, self-discovery, so they can track and map their progress. Are you involved in any of those? Have you looked at any of those? We're looking at neurofeedback tools. So from the voice, how do we get a biological frame that says this is where that person is in their system right now, and this is where they are after a period of coaching? So that's a whole area that we're exploring. Dynamic adaptation. It's really important that we're thinking, how do we keep bringing live tools and live ways of connecting that are up to date? If I bring a model to you that was created in the 80s or the 90s, while the model might still be relevant, the application might not be. Now, example of that is a business model, situational leadership, where it's looking at different ways in which you can manage staff. So it's one that people use in management, in business. And I've heard many coaches use situational leadership with their clients. Now, the terminology of the model is not relevant and up to date. So you're immediately creating a confusion for your client. So the question is, how are you updating tools and models that are relevant for your client? If you bring out the same old tool, you'll get the same result, but your clients are in a different place, in which case there's a gap. So how are you updating? How are you ensuring they're still fit for purpose? Ethical leadership, again, this would be a really important area for me. Are you all in supervision? It's not a hands up. I'm not looking for public exposure, but I would encourage you to just do that check for yourself. Are you in supervision? Do you have group supervision? Is it just one-to-one? You know, how are you ensuring that your practice is being explored from an ethical perspective? Because we all know we can miss things, can't we? And having that external view can really support us. With ethical leadership, how do we create contracts? How do we contract with our clients? How do we have that ongoing contracting? How are we accredited? Are we accredited? Do we believe in accreditation? Do we have a credential? Are we holding a credential? You know, all of these are areas to explore. And what I'm not saying here is that if you don't have a credential, you're not ethical. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to be thinking for yourself, why am I holding the position that I'm holding? So it's just that internal check. And then continuous learning, which I would imagine would be very relevant for all of you here. I often say I'm a lifelong learner. I've always got something that I'm learning. At the moment, I'm doing internal family systems. I'm absolutely loving it. But there's always something that I'm really exploring and bringing to the table. So for yourselves, how are you doing that? How are you ensuring that you're continually bringing learning? Now, those 5 areas were a lot. And I've also spoken for a lot. So what are your reflections on those 5 areas? What's coming to mind for you? And again, let's just have some voices in the room.
You made the point in point 1 and you said it was contentious, and I think it is contentious.
Yep.
To say, if I haven't run Shell, I can't coach someone who's running Shell because I couldn't possibly know what that's like. I might say, if I hadn't been homeless, I couldn't coach someone who's homeless. I think it's made me think about it, because I think we're never coaching someone in the same situation, because we're not in that situation. Rather, the questions that we ask explore, perhaps with innocence and with curiosity, where they're at. So perhaps sometimes it may be better not to actually have been in those situations. So that's the questions that are running around in my head around that first point that you made.
Lovely.
And I just wondered what others thought about it.
Yeah. And the reason for making it is that we have so many students that say, I want to be a leadership coach, as if that's somehow the top of the ladder. That's what I'm challenging. You know, it's you finding where you coach best. And if it is with the homeless, if it is, I'm working with somebody at the moment actually who coaches and works with people in strip clubs. That's her calling. That's where she wants to work. Now, she isn't a stripper. She doesn't work in a strip club, but she's well able to work in that space. So it's how do you find where your strengths are in your ability to coach? It's not about, I think there's a hierarchy in coaching and I think leadership is at the top of that. And therefore I'm going to be a leadership coach. That's really my point there. Yes. Is it Georgios? How do I say that?
It is. Thanks. I took your comment about following current trends differently. I took it as being familiar of what theories and what approaches are being discussed at the moment.
Yeah.
I understand the counterpoint that we're not consultants, we're coaches, and there's a fine line there to walk between that. But I think like knowing, being a leadership coach and knowing what are the latest trends about leadership is about speaking the language that the clients speak or
Yeah.
they hear others speak. So if we do not speak the same language and just stay with the insightful questions, I don't think we deliver the coaching that the clients need. So I fully appreciate your comments.
Lovely. Yeah. And I think that's true. I mean, if I bring it to a slightly different area, AI, let me bring it to AI. How many of you have looked into AI right now? Some. Yeah, lovely. And again, if you're thinking about a lot of the rhetoric, it's quite threatening, isn't it? It's like, lovely, Andrew, you're not hearing that. I really appreciate that. For some, it's almost like there's going to be no place for a coach in the future. And I'm thinking, what? Where has that come from? So it's an interesting space that unless we have that dialogue and really explore it, it calms our system down to recognize how can I work in harmony with this because it's not going away. And that's typical in all different areas. Penny, you've got a very light hand. Hello.
Thanks, Fiona. This is very stimulating. Actually, what's buzzing around in my head is the first one about anticipating the client needs. And I think that's something I find very tricky to balance the openness you need to have to really listen, i.e. not forming opinions or ideas before, and somehow, yes, doing that anticipation. Any hints or tips on how you balance the two?
One of the things that I heard recently, and this comes from the IFS training that I was on, it's how do we become agendaless so that we're reading completely the systemic data, and that's how I often phrase it. This is data in motion. And as the data is moving in motion, what I'm not doing is interpreting or creating any hooks into this means that. It's data and it's moving. And I think that helps us not get into, well, you must mean this, or when you say this, this is what you need. It's, because of the training with IFS, I'm hearing all the time people say, parts of me are thinking this and parts of me are thinking that. Now, I could immediately go into, oh, that's about IFS, let me get into that space. But actually, that's my agenda, that's not my client's. So it's always looking at what is the client agenda right now? And that's where that contracting and agenda at the beginning will help you recognize where it is that they want to go to. So that guidance is always, as you know, with our clients. Brilliant. Okay, any other comments before? Leanne, you're waving at me.
Yeah.
And James, too.
Can I just going back to the AI point? I've got quite a recent live example where, because of all the talk about AI taking over the coaching space, I had a little play around with something called HeyPi, HEYPI. And it's like a conversational, chatty, almost like sounding board partner is the best way to describe it. And I thought I would experiment with it, bringing a real, genuine dilemma that I had, and I can share it with you, is what do I go to be a parent governor at my son's school or not? I've got a lot on, and so I just wanted to have to kind of test the waters with it.
Yeah.
And it really surprised me how compassionate, engaging, empathic, and informative it was. It asked insightful questions.
Wow.
And these are the pros. I'll come to the drawbacks in a bit, but so there was no delayed gratification, so there's an immediacy, so there's no space to pause or reflect. It gives you the answer straight away. And what it did for me was it allowed me to explore different perspectives, have that kind of toing and froing, a bit of brainstorming, help me process my thoughts, and gave me enough to make a decision to kind of go ahead with it. So then I wrote my supporting statement, and I thought, I wonder if it can improve it. So then I went in, put my supporting statement in, and you know, bingo, it had kind of rearranged it a little bit and made it, improved it. It did it better than I could do to some degree. And it slightly freaked me out because I thought, wow, what is this? But then I experimented with other things, and there's something about there being a real lack of nuance. It responds to everything without any sense of prioritizing what's important and what's less important. It was too polished. No quirks, no awkwardness, no kind of clumsiness. So whilst it was simulating being a human, it lacked some of the imperfections and the kind of the crunchy bits that you have when you're exchanging with someone as a coach. It was interesting. It's I was left a bit vulnerable and slightly like, who am I talking to?
Yeah.
But you can ask questions about how it gathers its data to test the psychological safety of it. But it did make me think about vulnerable people and how that could be quite a dangerous space for them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're not through this space yet, are we?
No. So it was an interest. It's worth, if you've got a genuine, maybe practical scenario. Yeah. Experimenting and having a play around.
Yeah.
A bit too good to be true and a bit too positive, you know, real positive, over flattering, which is a bit annoying, but it's interesting.
Great experimentation, Leanne. Wonderful. James, were you looking to speak earlier? Were you waving just before Jeff came in?
I was thinking about raising my hand. I wasn't going to say something, but I will now on the basis of what Leanne said there. I'm using AI for when I'm publishing my newsletter, when I'm publishing posts on LinkedIn. And what I do is I just put that post in and say to AI, reword this for a LinkedIn post or LinkedIn newsletter to give it more zing. And I just read through and I take out the bits that I like and I leave in the bits that I like. So I'm just using it for my own ends, but it can really give you some fantastic ways of phrasing sentences that you wouldn't have thought of or putting it together. And as you say, Leanne, it's scary. It's better than you know, in a lot of ways. But it's just a tip for everybody. If you are publishing as coaches, newsletters, posts and things like that, it can make you look a lot more polished.
Thank you, James. And the other James without a surname attached to it, you've come off onto mute, onto speaker.
Fascinating discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I think when I hear these discussions on the latest technologies, I can't help but step back and look at from a almost a perspective of just the evolution of not just the technologies that are being brought into the world, but also our own evolution, our own evolving consciousness, in effect. And I find that a useful framework in order to be able to address where I am when I'm sitting there with my client. That almost the macro perspective seems to be my guiding framework. And we're always frightened of the things that we don't know, and there is a tendency for us to be. And so I think the guiding framework that I have is one of optimism, which is the belief in us as human beings and our ability to be able to ultimately get the best out of things. And so when I am looking at where I'm at, if I step back, it sometimes just helps me not get drowned by what seems to be right in front of my nose.
Yeah, really nice. And lovely to hear your reflective practice as well, James. Thank you for sharing that. And Jeff, you've been waiting patiently. Let me invite you in.
That's okay. Patience is my middle name. Yeah, it's the comment or the fifth bullet point, continuous learning, I find kind of to be pretty exciting as part of the list, because I have very few one-on-one single, coaching clients, and I work mainly in teams or in team coaching or in the corporate space there.
Yeah.
But in both, a lot of people always or companies have their values, part of it, continuous learning and development. They say that's what they're about, and a lot of times, like CEOs or certain people, I find, are really gung ho about that, and they do have that continuous learning mindset. But there's a certain vast majority of people in the middle ranks or in the lower ranks or as individuals, there's real no truth to continuous learning. So personal professional development is not really a thing to them. It's just it's another thing they have to do on the checklist because somebody says I have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's oh, sorry, you go.
so just in so inspiring or encouraging or creating a feel that it's important, just as it's one of the 5 on here, it's important. It's I find that sometimes that's a big challenge, is motivating people to want to incorporate continuous learning personally or professionally in some regard. So
Yeah, I had a lovely experience of that, Jeff, because I work with teams quite a lot too. And my question was, how many of you are involved in personal development that you are sponsoring for yourself? Therefore, you're paying for it for yourself. And it was quite interesting just noticing how many in that corporate environment were saying, well, if the company is not paying for it, I'm not going to do it. So the whole love of learning was not present. It was about ticking the box to do the chore rather than the love of learning. And that's often what I find I get involved with team dynamics. It's how to bring about the learning of one another. So that self-awareness piece, and then how can they use that with their teams? And that seems to be a way in to develop learning, but it needs a purpose. It needs that intention. How will this benefit me? One of the phrases that I hear a lot at the moment is, we've got to do more with less. Now, I'm sure you've heard it as well. It's a double bind, isn't it? How do we do more with less? We're immediately in a double bind. So again, it's how do we support the learning aspect, which might encourage the doing, not necessarily more, and I don't want to say efficiently, because it's kind of then implying it wasn't efficient in the past, but it might need a different way of doing things. And how might that difference come about has to be through learning and exploring and developing awareness. Okay, let me go back because I'm going to start putting you into rooms in a moment so you can have a little chat with one another, which is always really lovely, touching base with other people in the room. So here is something to do later. Just kind of rate yourself out of 10. Where do you think you are? And when you're thinking about anticipating client needs, as Penny was saying, lovely question. Where are you? Where would you put yourself? Current trends. And again, you're not going to share that with anyone. That's just for yourself. And it could be that you think, do you know what? That dynamic adaptation, I'm using the same old tools in the same old way. I need to update some of my tools or not. I leave it with you. So moving on to the mastery mindset. And as I mentioned, we are going to be looking at this quite quickly. And I want to put all of them up on the table as it were right now. What we're going to do is explore this in an exercise, and I will explain how to do this because we're going to use something called Padlet. And I'm not sure if you've used Padlet before, but I will explain how to use it in a moment. So the first area that we're looking at here is, what is it about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset? How do we move into a growth mindset? And you will actually have a question. So what does the growth mindset look like? How can it be built? When we're thinking of challenge, how do we develop challenge as a consistent motivation rather than the threat of challenge, because the threat is something that, you know, it just creates all sorts of different chemical releases in our body that don't support us to move forward. So how could challenge be something that's a reward rather than a threat? The three brains, how do we get those aligned in terms of head brain, or our mind brain, our heart brain, and our gut brain? Triggers and biases, that's what these are down here. And that's a little bit where I was saying, how do we get hooked into different contents? You know, what is it that hooks us? Where might our biases be? EQI, you know, how do we ensure that we're building our awareness, not just of ourselves and others, but that self and co-regulation, so that we're always impacting in a really positive way. And lastly, that self-reflection piece. Now, how we're going to do this, you're going to have different rooms. So you will notice you will have a room 1 to 6. First of all, think about what is the meaning of the question? Because often we jump straight into action, don't we? Oh, this is what I need to do. Actually, I'd encourage you to take some time. What does the question mean for you? And then what are the different ways your room question could be action? That's where you get going with the actions. Now, with Padlet, you have to publish your thoughts, and I will explain again how to do that. And the Padlet will be available afterwards so that you can go back in and you can check in with this. In terms of what you bring back into the room, it'd be great to know, how did you work together? And you might want to nominate somebody to put that into chat. So as a group, how did you work? And then a comment or a question or a reflection, something about your room question, and nominate somebody in your group to speak. Okay? So these will be the questions and they will be in your room. But if you'd like to see them beforehand, then you can just get a quick glimpse there. In chat, you will see a Padlet link. If you click on that, you will come to this window. You haven't got into any rooms yet, so don't worry. When you go into your room, you will all be that room looking at the same Padlet. So all of us are looking at the same Padlet. Room 1. You will be talking about to maintain a growth-orientated attitude. How do I do that? Now, if you click on here, you can get a subject. So you can head it up as you won't say this, but our thoughts. Write something fantastic. We believe you need to constantly be aware of current trends. Now, you will also see that it says publish. Watch what happens when I press publish. It comes up straight away. Okay? This is how we use Padlet. This is so useful online as a working document because we can all work on it at the same time. Now you can edit this, you can duplicate it, or as I'm going to do, we're going to delete it. Okay? If you don't publish, we lose your work. So as you capture an idea, publish it, and then you go on to your next. So under room 1, those of you who are room 1, you will publish different ideas underneath each one. Now, let me just ask you, is that making sense? Yes? You're excited to go and use a new tool? I mean, you might want to take a group consensus on the question, but then you can all add up, or you can just ask one person to do it. I'd encourage you, because of time, all of you get typing, because then we'll have some beautiful comments. And you'll have 15 minutes in the room, okay? How did you find the Padlet? Thumbs up, thumbs medium, thumbs down. Where are we? Ooh, Stacey.
Thanks to Penny.
Thanks to Penny. Okay. All right. So hopefully that's a new tool that you can explore together. Now, each group, one person's nominated and writing in chat observations from how you worked as a group. and one person speaking into the room. Any questions, observations, reflections, something from your work together? And we'll do it in order. So, you know, I know the creeping death is a bit horrible, especially when you're 6. But if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So room 1, who's going to be speaking into our room? Just something from your time together.
Hello, I guess it's me.
Eric,
We decided
lovely.
the last second before the group ended. So hello, everyone. First of all, so far, thank you for this dialogue. It's amazing. If I want to summarize what we said in group 1, we said a lot of very interesting things. So I hope I make it justice for it. And what I loved is that we defined growth as being uncomfortable. So stepping out of our comfort zone. That I found that this was the best thing that was said. And at the end of the day, under this falls different categories, such as going to CPD, continuous learning, doing webinars, conference, so to learn more about what are the trends, but even to learn more about ourselves as coaches.
Lovely.
So for example, it's about self-awareness. So when we feel stuck, how can we learn more, add more skills, and having this growth mindset?
Love that.
In few words.
Thank you, Tarek. One of the phrases that I use a lot is, how can we embrace being safely uncomfortable? And it just changes that whole, because people often say, I need to step out of my comfort zone. I don't know about you, but that threatens my system. Why do I want to step outside of my comfort zone? Whereas if I want to embrace being safely uncomfortable, do you see how it's a different energy within our system? So linguistics make a real difference. So thank you, Tarek, for offering that up. Room 2, let's come to you.
We didn't pick anybody. We were struggling a little bit, I think, with the question, and we'd all come at it from very different perspectives of what a challenge could be. So I think we didn't really have a consensus. That's how it felt to me, anyhow, in the group, as somebody to feed back on. But some of the ideas you can see there is, you know, we talked about meeting the coachee where they are, because some people like challenges and others and see them as opportunities automatically. In fact, almost too much sometimes. You know, we talked about somebody I was coaching this morning who loves a challenge and can jump straight in without thinking, you know, the impact. So one person thought that some of us couldn't coach unless we saw challenges as opportunities and came from that mindset. So we were just debating it and having and trying to understand people's perspectives, because they're quite different.
Love that. And again, you know, wherever you get to is right. You know, that dialogue is really what creates the richness around this.
Absolutely.
We're so different, you know. Yeah. Love that. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, room 3.
We had a very rich conversation. And I think one of the kind of key takeaways from that is really the importance of doing our own work and self-regulating before stepping into a room or a space, or however it is that you define that with a client, and making sure that we're doing our own work to arrive in a very, you know, kind of steady, even, neutral state. And in some instances, one of the examples that was given was one of the room participants had something very personal going on at the time and recognized that she couldn't fully be there for her client, and therefore took the opportunity during the actual session to kind of call time on it as such and offer another session, but recognizing that due to the nature of that particular experience, hadn't been able to self-regulate in a way, very understandably, to be able to arrive into that coaching space in the right way, for example. A lot of great kind of methodologies, tools were also mentioned in terms of whether it's yoga or mindfulness or breathing, or also some kind of, in a way, somatic practice that enables us all to come into the room in the right state. And recognizing, I think, Pheona mentioning, picking up on what you were talking about before in terms of self-regulation and co-regulation. So if we self-regulate first, then it means that we're entering into that space with a better opportunity for that co-regulation to happen in a very seamless and beneficial way. So a very rich conversation.
Yeah, and a really rich way of feeding back and feeding forward. Love that, Tara. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
it's interesting because, yeah, we know this stuff, but are we practicing it? So that's what I really want to bring home. How do we embrace the parts of our conversation that we can do much more easily so that they are a part of our muscle, rather than the nice to haves, or yeah, we should, but we're not. You know, let's make it as simple and as practical as we possibly can, you know? So how do we do it? So it's simple, it's easy, it's quick, that muscle's built. So my neurons immediately connect to self-regulate in that moment because I know how to do that. So that's what we're looking to build, isn't it? Love it, Tara. Room 4. Let's keep going.
Hello, everyone. I was asked to speak for group 4, so
lovely.
I made some notes as we kind of spoke. I think I captured bullet points from what everybody was saying. So, kind of, you know, summarizing it might be challenging because there were so many different points. But I think one of the ones I wrote down, which was my own, was just from a background of overcoming resiliency. Like if that, so that triggers me, and that was one. Being aware of emotional awareness in other people and behaviors. There was an interesting, really point that the demographic and where we're from, you know, our cultural background from different countries, growing up in one country, but then coaching and working in another. So that cultural bias was a big impact. One of our group members had that very specific detail where he was lived close to Russia and the impact of the influence from you know, years ago. This is a long time ago. Forced him to move to another part of the world or European area, and one of his clients was from Russia, so he had that internal bias about the aggressiveness from Russia affecting the way he thought about that potential client. And I actually asked him how he overcame that, you know, with conversation. And if I understood it correctly, it was what was inside of him that really drove that, and it wasn't really important that bias, because he was able to overcome it with what's really important coming out, I guess, out of his heart. And then the last bullet point I jotted down was that we come at it with an unconscious bias, I guess, you know, so we don't know what we don't know, and trying to recognize the pure unconsciousness of what it is we're not bringing potentially to that conversation. And then one of the things I remember that I didn't jot down was one of our members in our group does a lot of physical training, coaching and training, and the facial expressions of people who won't get it or don't get it or might be struggling, if I'm saying that correctly. And so that bias of being or seeing the physical component which people are bringing to the training and the workout at the time was a trigger potentially. So hope I captured that well. Group 4, I'm really liking this funky Padlet thing. It's pretty cool.
But it looks like you're getting a thumbs up, so Jeff, well done. Yeah, that calibration, how do we calibrate? So what's typical for your client may absolutely not be typical for you, but it's that calibration that then sets that in motion, which is really useful. Okay, route 5.
We use our AI tools to start off with to just get a definition of what does emotional intelligence mean. So if you scroll to the bottom of the Padlet, you'll see what ChatGPT came up with. And then we started working through some of those areas to think about, well, what does that mean for us as a coach? And you'll see that in the comments too. So the first one was around the self-awareness, talking a bit, Pheona, about how we started with you, which is being aware of how you are yourself before you go into a session and what emotion or what energy or state you're in. But also the team talked about then what does that mean for the client as well. And there were different methods for either getting people to take a mindfulness moment or allowing them to take their camera off if they felt uncomfortable doing that, but getting them to think about their state as well as us being able to think about our own. We talked then, if you kind of work through some of this, the self-regulation, we also talked about trying to suspend judgment or being aware when we might be being judgmental, and our own emotions when we're having the conversation. And there was a bit of a discussion about, well, if we don't think we're in the right state, then has anyone cancelled a session or postponed it because they didn't think they would give 100% to that client? And therefore, we agree that the best thing to do would be to move that session on rather than to go into it when you're not giving 100% yourself, because it's going to influence the experience for the client. Yeah. What else? I'm just looking through. We also talked a bit about listening. So thinking about our listening skills, and I think we all acknowledge that is a continuous challenge to be, fully engaged and listening always, and to make sure that you're doing that without the judgment or thinking about how to respond, but how do you truly listen and engage in the topic. And there was some conversation around trusting your intuition as well when you're in those situations. And part of it was around, if you model that behavior yourself, then that also helps with how that your client may be or what situation they're in. Many people use this model with their clients as part of their coaching as well, to help when they're working through a situation with a client, to give them the kind of emotional intelligence kind of framework, helps them think about their own situation. Yeah. And I'll shut up now and see if anyone wants to add anything to that or further. Thank you.
Oh, you don't need to shut up at all, Katie. That was lovely hearing you speak. Thank you very much. And it was interesting when we're talking about that that listening piece. How do we measure our listening capabilities? How are you measuring your global listening skills, capabilities, abilities? How do you measure your presence? These are all really useful questions. How present are we? And I often do this exercise where I'll say to people, how present are you? How are you right now? And they'll all go, yeah, I'm really up for this. I'm in. And then I'll do some wild writing where they really start reflecting on how they are, what's going on for them. And then I say to them, now, how present are you? And they'll go, oh my gosh, I thought I was present and I wasn't. I was half somewhere else and half here. So again, it's just a really useful way to keep aligning. How am I being right now? And what is it I might need to let go of in order to let come? So we talk about that a lot, Otter Sharma. What do I need to let go in order to let come? So Katie, lovely, thank you. Group 6, last but not least.
So the main thing that we started kicking around, so to speak, is when you talk about self-reflective, does it have to be alone? So that's down below, but we got stuck there a little while. We talked about people's experience with supervision, and excuse my looking away, but I'm looking at the Padlet.
Okay. Sorry.
You can do it in a diary. You can go ahead and self-reflect in your diary. We do that. We talked about doing that after a session or during the week. I kind of write in a book about gratitudes daily, and that's sort of a self-reflection. So that's what I reflect on. And what do you reflect on? We all talked about different things. How we were, how your client was, how my client was, what you did well, what could have been done better. Did you step in your leadership and wish you hadn't, that kind of thing. So again, we chewed on the idea, and I'd love opinions. What do we mean by self-reflective? Does it have to be on our own? We decided it doesn't. It can be one-on-one, it can be group, it can be your journal, it can be all those kinds of things. And that's one of the things that's next. What would you add, Penny? Because you were the writer.
Is that Penny Lawrence? Because she just had to go, actually.
Oh, she did, the little rascal.
Yeah, only just, Diane. So
Okay, I didn't see her because I was looking at the,
yeah.
the writing that she had already done. She was our scroll. It was just interesting to think about how deep can you go by yourself. And we like to get things, I like to get feedback. I'll just add this, I'm a neuroscience nerd too. And one of the guys that wrote a book, Dr. Engelman, said that we kind of hallucinate, literally his word, in our minds. And so I'd like to get feedback when I'm self-reflecting. If I had, to kind of ground my thoughts. Yeah.
A really nice little addition that you might enjoy, Diane, is feed forward.
Yeah.
So feedback is feeding back on a situation. Feed forward is how in the future.
I like that. I like that phrase.
Yeah, moves you into reward. Okay, so that's our 6 groups. What a rich session. I've really enjoyed hearing your voices. You have the Padlet that you could go back to. I'm noticing time. We have 8 minutes to go. My goodness, this time has just flown by. So in terms of the optimism, again, what I'd encourage you to do is reach out to me and I can give you that exercise. But I'd like to finish with some wild writing. Has anyone done wild writing before? Show me? No. Okay, so wild writing is where you are just writing, allowing the energy to come from your heart and your gut all the way down your arm into your hand, and you're just writing. Okay, so it's not a head exercise. I'm not looking for your cognitive responses, as beautiful as they are. I'm looking for the heart and the gut to just start writing. All right, are you okay to do this with me? Give it a go. All right, so pen and paper or type, however you want to do this. I'll only ask you 3 questions. Question 1, and you'll have a minute at the end to write, okay? What has really stood out from this session today for you? What has really stood out from this session today for you? Write from your heart and your gut. 1 minute. And keep writing. If you notice you've come to an end, just keep writing. Okay, next question. What are the different ways I can use whatever has stood out for me? What are the different ways I can use whatever has stood out for me? And again, 1 minute and just keep writing. Okay, last question. How would I describe my energy levels right now? How would I describe my energy levels right now? Okay, so that was just 3 minutes of wild writing. That's a beautiful way of just capturing how are you right now. Remember that at the beginning, when I invited you in, I said to you, check in with your energy. How are you arriving? Then we looked at the self-regulation piece, self-awareness. Then we've looked at some ways of keeping 1 step ahead. And then with the Padlet, I asked you to start by agreeing what is the question so that we don't dive in, which is what we often do. And now again, we're doing a bit of reflective writing. How am I now? What's going on for me right now? I'm hoping this gentle practice of inner reflection that just keeps us really present and aligned with who we are and what we're doing has really supported you. We have run out of time. It really has been a pleasure being with you. This is my first EMCC dialogue. And
we'd love to have you back again, Pheona. It's been wonderful. It's been such an important conversation for us to just pause and just see where we are in ourselves, and you know, I think we're all as guilty as each other. You just keep going, don't you? You just keep going. You just stop with that intentional pause and thinking, how am I today? How am I appearing today? What's triggering me today? What's you know, how am I turning up today? So this has been really a really good reminder and a resetter. And you know, so you see all those, you know, Sunday reset videos on TikTok, don't you think? It's like a bit of a life reset. I like this. But just before we end, I'd like to ask you the same question you asked everybody else, actually, Pheona. What is it that sticks in your mind from this session yourself? What are you yourself taking away from this session?
I enjoyed the learning about HeyPi. I think that's how you say it. So that was a new tool that I'd not heard of before. I think there's something about when you position something. So when I was saying about that first point, leadership, and just noticing how easily you can be understood and misunderstood, and how language can have so many limitations, especially around time. So I'm just noticing that as well, how as a presenter in this space, how do I ensure that the communication is clear and lands in the way that I might want it to? So I'm really conscious of that. I'm also really mindful. I would love to spend all day with you guys. You know, there are so many different areas that I think we could explore, and I'd love to hear more from you. So I'm holding that in my system as well, that I've done a lot of the speaking, but actually for me, it really is collaboration and how do we work together. And I really enjoyed the way that you've all gone to Padlet. So I hope you enjoy using it moving forward.
We all love learning new stuff. Pheona, thank you so much. And can I give you a big EMCC Global thank you for leading this discussion today? Thank you.
My pleasure, it really is. Thank you.